This week, we flipped the script in the leadership and communications section, what it takes to be a transformational CISO. Put your metrics where your mouth is, 5 simple ways to make better decisions, and more. In our second segment, we welcome Param Eftekhari, Senior Vice President and Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Collaborative, to discuss the power of true peer-to-peer collaboration. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. With over half of enterprise security budgets going towards detection and response in 2020, the challenge is investing in solutions that can migrate and scale with your business. ExtraHop helps security teams spot threats up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently in hybrid and multi-cloud environments with cloud-native network detection and response. Kick the tires in the full product demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. The most at-risk industries like financial, tech, and government agencies use web isolation to keep their networks and users secure. The Silo Web Isolation platform by Authenticate allows users to experience the web in full isolation, eliminating the chance of a web-borne cyber attack. You can interact with malicious files and websites without worry, even if you're working remotely. Authenticate enables anyone, anywhere, on any device to experience the web without risk. See how it works at securityweekly.com/authenticate. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 190, recorded October 5th, 2020. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in sunny Colorado. Joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island are my co-hosts, Mr. Paul Asadorian and Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, good to be here.
You guys are on the new set. You got the new mics. You're looking fantastic.
It's a great setup.
Yeah, I did a round of upgrades. It was. I'm really super happy with it. Actually, couple more to go.
There
smaller,
you go.
Yeah, but it's fun.
Yeah, smaller. You got a budget to stick to. Remember that.
That's what Johnny's giving me crap about that. Actually, he's like, that's gonna eat up our budget. I know, but like we need that.
The audiophile and Paul. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We will review those suggestions monthly and reach out once they've been approved. It's official. Security Weekly, in partnership with Cyber Risk Alliance, is excited to present Security Weekly Unlocked on December 10th, 2020. The inaugural edition of Security Weekly Unlocked also celebrates Security Weekly's 15th anniversary. Registration and call for speakers is now open. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to submit your speaking session and register for free. All right. It's October, flu season starting up. Our original guest is sick, so we flipped the script today. We're going to start with articles and then do a second segment with Param from the Cyber Risk Alliance portfolio. So last week, Jason, we were talking about the different roles and habits of CISOs. This week, we talk about the characteristics of CISOs.
Yeah, this first article, I think, is looking at it from a next generation CISO perspective, right? What does it mean to be a next generation CISO?
Yeah, and it's funny because when you read these and then you look at the next article, which is this concept of a transformational CISO, which is also, I think, a next generation CISO, you've got some differences, but you have some overlap. So it was interesting to compare these two articles on what is it, what is the next generation CISO? What skill set? And one thing that popped out is look, you better be ready for change.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt. I mean, that's the biggest.
More so than ever before, we all have to be embracing change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think some of it is a change in mentality, though, right? Because, historically, the security team has kind of been that sentry, that gatekeeper, where now it's a mentality of, listen, if you're not enabling the business, you're a roadblock. And the business doesn't want a roadblock, right? They want somebody who can partner with the business. One of the worst things I've heard is when a leader comes in and says, "Oh, you're from the security team. You're you're the company's insurance policy, right?" And that drives me crazy. So no, I mean we're here to be an enabler of the business. We're here to partner with the business. We're not here to be a roadblock. And I think that's when this first article says balance opportunity with risk. And that's what I pulled out of that piece is listen, be there for the business, be a business enabler. Don't be viewed as a roadblock. Demonstrate that leadership level that you can partner with the business and truly show the value.
Yeah, and it's more of a value proposition now that CISOs really have to think about. What value am I providing back to the business? How can I enable security, but also allow the business to continue to do what it is there to do, which is, look, it's there to create revenue, create profit, create jobs, right? And sometimes security is looked at as an inhibitor to that. Right. So how do you embrace the opportunity that the business has and also provide a level of security along the way?
Yeah. And again, it's a shift in mindset, right? And us as leaders, if you want the seat at the table, you got to be ready to take that seat at the table and everything that comes with it, right? It's the relationship building. Some of it is the politics side. Some of it is sitting back and saying, you want to know what? I may have to take a different tactic to get this accomplished or a different road to get this accomplished. Let's figure out the outcomes. We talk about outcomes all the time. Let's figure out what the outcomes are, and let's figure out a way that collaboratively we can get to those outcomes together.
Yeah, I think it's what I would add to this list and maybe enhancing what's already there, right, is breaking down silos, making sure you don't create silos and making sure that you break down ones that exist. And security itself traditionally it can fall into this silo where you're like, well, if you need a firewall rule change, you got to throw it over to the security people, right? And they're going to decide like how long that takes, and there's SLAs in place and all that stuff. To really being in partnership and breaking down those silos. Also, the communication skills, something we've talked about on the show in the past, is you have to be able to communicate effectively to many different audiences, right? You have to talk to your user base, finance, legal, HR, technical people, not technical people, and that's super important. And I think a subset of you can have good communication skills, but knowing how to tune those and apply those to different audiences is definitely
100% correct. Yeah, I mean, there was a section in here called finding their own voice is one of the success criteria.
Yeah, I would lump that in there.
And honestly, it's find your own voice, but know your audience, right? Know your audience when you're sitting at the executive table with all the other business unit leaders and how you articulate something, but you could articulate that differently, right?
Yeah,
to different audiences.
Knowing and doing are two different things. And I feel like you got to make that mistake and be like, oh, that was the wrong way to communicate with that audience before it's fine-tuned, right? Like guilty, I've done that. Learn the hard way.
Yeah, the second article brings out a couple good points, right? Dynamic and adaptable, and back again to communication, where you almost have to be a salesman a little bit. When you think about it, you're trying to sell aspects of security to these other groups. And you're like, no, really, you need this, right? And those communication skills definitely come into play to be able to understand your audience, how to communicate with them and get them on board. And that's a set of soft skills that you're going to see more and more important, not just for the CISO, but I think for security professionals in general.
Oh, absolutely, right. I mean, some of it in here is one of them is be more open to alternatives, right? Make sure there's no gray area. Be open to gray area, and that there is gray area. Sorry, but that's a key where we can't be sitting in a meeting and just definitively say no, we can't do that, right? Sometimes you have to leave a meeting that may have multiple executives in it and have a sidebar conversation, right? I mean, sometimes you have to support the other people that are there and not make definitive decisions in public.
Even though you know the answer is
know the answer is going to be no, because you still want to keep that constituency
That should be your book.
supporting you.
How to say no without saying no.
Right.
That's really like, it'd be a great book for CISOs because you really.
It's true. It's true, right? Because again, you want to make sure you continue to have those folks support, but by just flat out making decisions and meetings in front of other folks, again, know your audience, know place and time for certain conversations. Sometimes you're better off staying silent and then having a sidebar conversation after, right? And making those decisions together.
Yeah, I think as you grow, I hope that folks find themselves not saying no, but saying, I'd like to work with you to figure out how to get this done,
That's
right?
the key.
And you may decide that it's still not going to happen, but maybe it does happen in a slightly different way, right? And you make compromises.
Yeah, and ultimately the goal is to get the folks you're working with to support that decision. It won't always happen, but at least work for that.
Well, that's the thing. It's easier to just say no.
Yeah.
No, we can't do
totally.
that, right?
You're right.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to skip down to the CIO article that says, look, security, you better be ready for permanent work from home. So I have this question for you, Jason. Are you telling yourself to be ready for security?
We're at a point now where we had prepped for this for so long that it was an open runway for us, right? I mean, we're different than other companies, though. We're a technology company, right? So 80% of our workforce was already remote or had remote capabilities and didn't have to be in the office, so we were prepped for that. But at the end of the day, any organization should have that level of preparation, but just strategically have to scale it, I would think, right? So, I mean, even if you only had 5 people who were remote in your organization at that point in time, you should have been focusing on security around your remote workforce.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Right.
But I do think security teams are much more likely to be in a position to work from home for a lot of reasons, right? In number one, COVID aside, the talent shortage, right? And the ability to find the right talent, you can't always find that in your area. Yeah. And I think for that reason, a lot of security folks, especially on the research side, already work from home. Yeah. Because it's hard to find people with that unique skill set. The other thing is when you're responding to an incident, as an example, you can always bring. Oftentimes, let's face it, incidents happen off hours, and so we learned over time how to collaborate remotely and have remote access to the things we needed, so that we could respond to that incident remotely. Because oftentimes they're on nights and weekends, and if you're on vacation that day or whatever, guess what? If you're a key piece of that incident response, like you're getting pulled in, especially if the organization's at stake, if it's a high enough criticality incident. So. For those 3, security has to be able to work from home just for those 2 reasons, and that COVID isn't even on that list yet, right?
Yeah. Just to put it back into the context of the article, though, this was heavily focused on public sector. And what I will say is public sector, in the most part, isn't always ready, especially when you get down to the state and local government side of the aisle. They're not always prepped, right? So I can see it from that perspective, looking at it from the public sector, state, local education, that type of stuff. They need to be ready to have a certain amount of people working from home.
Well, because there's a cost with setting that up, right? It's making sure that everyone's got their laptops, making sure you're subscribed to the right conferencing software, the right chat software, collaboration software, VPNs, concentrators. Oh, by the way, if I need to power something off in the data center, if I still have stuff in a data center, and let's face it, many people do, right? I need equipment for that, and that needs to be monitored, maintained, and all that stuff. So,
yeah, and the public sector is a lot different from the private sector in the fact that you're forced to have a lot of your information open. So it's really being able to define what is open access information versus what is not, right? And really figuring out that. You talk about it all the time, right? It's identity, it's application, it's data, right? That you need to protect. And a lot of that in the public sector has to be open just because of the laws.
Yeah. But when it is confidential, now that means you've got skiffs everywhere for people to consume this data if they can't get to a central location. So it does put some different challenges for different industries. Financials have been heavily on-prem versus remote. This will be a shift for them. And what the article is trying to say is, look, we got to think about these new threat vectors and attack vectors that are going to emerge if we keep the majority, if not all of our employees in a remote home situation. Some people thought this was temporary, and others are saying, no, this is probably a little more permanent. We better be ready.
Yeah, I think for certain departments, it's going to be a lot more permanent security in software development for sure. Even for financial, I don't have a great scientific. I didn't study this in a scientific manner, but talking to some of my friends that work in finance, like they're all on security teams and they're all working from home.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's going to be a business decision, right? And organization's going to look at it and say, why do I need this brick and mortar building that I'm paying for electricity, for heating, for cooling, for water, for all of this overhead when I don't need it? When my teams have been successful over the past 6-7 months, they're going to revisit it, right? And they're going to look at leases and they're going to look at selling off buildings. And I'm going to make the assumption that public sector will mature to that eventually anyway, right? Because they're going to start seeing that, wow, we've had 50% of our workforce not have to be in a building. Can we continue to do this and not have that burden on the taxpayer of having to pay for these buildings?
Ooh, maybe we can balance a budget?
Oh, who would think?
Wishful thinking.
Who would think?
Wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking. Because if you give them the money, they're going to figure out how to spend
it somewhere else.
100%.
This next article was an interesting article. We talk about metrics a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought this was a really interesting article about how what you say is your mission and how you align that to your key performance indicators sometimes comes back to bite you in the butt. I thought this was a really good lesson. It's an HBR, Harvard Business Review article about Rio Tinto and who they claim their stakeholders are. But when you looked at their KPIs and how they reported, there wasn't really alignment there. And I thought it was just a really good example for people to right size their KPIs.
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, what you're measured on drives behavior. That's how it goes, right? There's always that that funny saying in sales, right? The metrics you give your salespeople are going to drive what they sell. So if you want them to sell certain things, make the metrics do that for you. Otherwise, they're just going to keep selling what they sold over time, right? It's the same idea. Those metrics that you judge different folks on, their success criteria are going to drive certain behaviors. So you have to make sure that you're setting up these drivers to the outcome that you're looking to achieve, right? And I thought it was funny about, the company that they talked about, they basically said customers, community, our people, and our shareholders that's our main focus, that's our main mission. But the metrics did not prove that at all.
They were all shareholder focused.
Well, yeah, pretty much.
At the end of the day, because it was all around the financials, pretty much. I think they had one about zero emissions from a carbon emissions footprint.
Yeah.
But when you look at a lot of the other ones, they were all focused heavily on the shareholder because they had financial ramifications to the shareholder, but didn't think about those other stakeholders.
Yeah, right. And then what's going to drive the behavior for the decisions that the CEO makes? Knowing that the metrics that he or she are driving to, is all about the shareholder. So that's what they're going to make their decisions on. Yeah.
So we're getting ready to go through this process of identifying KPIs. So this was a relevant article.
I was going to say, it's pretty timely.
Yeah. It is for us, because I'm like, if we're going to identify our KPIs, we better make sure they align to all of our stakeholders, which includes the community, which is a big part of what we do here, and employees and our sponsors, right? We have three really big stakeholders here. So it was a good lesson for me to think about all three of those stakeholders when we start to establish KPIs and our budgeting process under the new Cyber Risk Alliance umbrella. So I learned something. The next article, 5 simple ways to make better decisions. I just go to the last one, coin toss.
When I looked at that one, I said, you got to be kidding me. But then I actually read it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because tossing the coin forces an emotional reaction because you're hoping for one or the other, ultimately, right? In your core of core, you're hoping for one or the other, and by flipping the coin, it forces that emotional reaction, and now all of a sudden you can say, oh, wait a minute. If you're disappointed when you see that coin fall, then maybe that's the wrong decision. So
but also to that end, two faces to a coin. Sometimes not doing something is also a decision.
No action is an action.
Yes. Right? And you may be tossing a coin going in between two different actions, but there's a third one there, right? That's, it could be doing nothing for now, for a certain period of time.
True.
So not all decisions are cut and dry like that, right?
Yeah.
So,
they're not created equal.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are some items in here that make sense, right? Fewer options makes better decisions. Well, yeah, there's not as much complexity, right? You have fewer options. Decision by committee, never liked it, right? Smaller group, the better.
Yep. And they talk about when to make decisions earlier in the day before you're fatigued. I see that, right? I try to get the work that I need to get done that's most critical, I try to do as early in the day as possible, because I know after 2 podcasts, by the time I get out of this, my brain is fried, right? That's not the time you want to be making decisions.
Right.
Yeah,
that's when I would sleep on it.
Absolutely, right.
But I don't know about the decision fatigue, right? And let's face it, in security, we've got a lot of decisions to make that are very impactful. And a lot of these articles over the years on this show have talked about, what to wear, what to eat, and, decision fatigue. I think that if you can reduce, and I don't know if I buy into that, right? I think if you can make less decisions in your day, it gives you more time to think about other things, right? It's not necessarily like, I'm making too many decisions, all these micro level decisions. I think that if you can wake up in the morning and go, I got this thing going on, like I really gotta focus on this problem, think about the pros and cons and impacts of my decision. If you don't have to think about what to wear because it's already laid out from the night before, that puts you in a better place.
Agreed.
That's just my kind of tip on that.
Yeah. I want to skip to the last article so we have time for the next interview segment today. And Jason, you brought this one up this morning. If we were covering articles about OFAC and this whole ransomware penalty, I guess is a good way to say it.
On October 1st, and I knew it would spawn some debate, conversation among the listeners because there's different philosophies. But there was an advisory that came out on October 1st from the Department of the Treasury, and it's titled "Advisory on Potential Sanctions: Risk for Facilitating Ransomware Payments." And when you start reading into it, it's basically outlining a method for the Department of Treasury to put sanctions on folks who decide, if they get hit with ransomware, to pay the ransom. And I know there's lots of philosophies out there, right? You don't negotiate with terrorists. Paying the ransom could actually spawn more ransomware to happen because now it becomes a business. It could force them to attack you again because they know you're willing to pay. So I figured this would spawn a good debate, and good conversation around that, because now the government's actually stepping in saying, we could sanction you if you pay it. And now ransomware negotiator as a job could be gone.
It could be. And it's an interesting way to think about this is by saying you potentially could get sanctioned, the argument here is that it would prevent fewer payouts and therefore drop the overall ransom being asked for because it's less likely that it's going to get paid because they're regulating the payment. I'm not sure if that's true or not.
There's the other side of the coin.
Rationale.
There's the other side of the coin now because organizations may stop announcing that they got hit with ransomware, right? Notifying they got hit with ransomware, and now kind of sneaking under the cover. Because I look at it both sides of the aisle, right? In theory, not negotiating with terrorists is great, but knocking on wood, right? If I ever got hit, if my company got hit, would I be feeling the same way? I don't know.
Yeah, but if less people are paying the ransom, that would drive the cost up. It would be my guess that the ransomware authors would be like, I'm just going to charge people more because less people are paying. I think the real reason, and I'm not sure it was in the article mentioned somewhere, but I think the real reason not for people not to pay the ransom is you're funding cyber criminals and potentially other nation states.
That's the mindset, right?
That's we've talked about that on the shows. That's why I don't like to see people paying the ransom, but there's a lot more to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when executives get together, you have these kind of conversations, and we've seen customers get hit really, really hard with ransomware attacks, and the CFO and I are talking about it and saying, and I bring up the topic of don't negotiate with terrorists. You're just enabling them to want to do it more, and he's like, But if my business was completely down and that was my only option to bring revenue back in here, damn straight I'm going to be having the conversation with you about paying a ransom. Because that's the business thinking about it, right?
That's exactly right. But now there's an impact to that business decision if the Treasury is going to come in and put sanctions in place. That changes that business decision. So what do you do as a business if you can't pay the ransom, they don't give you your data back, and you go out of business? You're going to go sue the Treasury Department?
Right.
Yeah, because I was thinking, what if you get like one free pass? Like you can pay one ransom and that's it. Like second one, now it's negligence, right? Gross negligence maybe. But that, as Matt points out, your first ransom payment, that may put you out of business regardless if you decide to pay it or not, the impact of that.
I'll tell you what it did do. This article came out, and the first thing I did was get my management team together and say, we better be solid on our BCDR plan. We better start looking, you know what I mean? We better make sure that if something were to ever happen, we have our microsegmentation down to a point where nobody could get to our backup files, right? I mean, it's literally making you revisit your BCDR to ensure that it's safe. And we're talking about offline backups.
Yeah, but like that being said, though, you're still, if an attacker's motivated enough, they're still going to be able to ransomware any organization on the planet if they're motivated enough. If they have enough resources and the like I like to say, the juice is worth the squeeze. Doesn't matter. Like they're going to go to great lengths to do that and to penalize a company. I know. How do you differentiate the people that have done their due diligence versus ones that haven't and enforce this on a different level and say, well, almost like cyber insurance, right? Like, that's really kind of what this needs to look like. As much as I hate cyber insurance, but there are companies that are like Jason said, we're going through great lengths. We're microsegment. We're protecting our backups as best we can. That doesn't mean, I mean, you know, we all know people that could be like, well, I could still ransomware, you know, that organization. Those people are out there, right? So I think it's an interesting.
How do you make the juice not worth the squeeze? I guess is how you get it. Is how you do it, right? How do you make it so it's too difficult and too time consuming to want to spend that time? But honestly, this is why I brought up the article, because I think we could probably have a whole show on this. You know what I mean? Because you brought up cyber insurance, and there's conversations that I have with folks from insurance companies that I'm like, you actually have your incident response folks that you bring in recommending to go pay a ransom. What are you doing? You're literally creating a life cycle where you're creating a scenario saying ransomware is happening, buy more insurance. Right, and by the way, pay the terrorists. So I think it's tons of room for debate. I think I could put myself on both sides of the aisle and really play devil's advocate on both sides, knowing the business and knowing the security side. And I just think it would be great conversation with as we learn more about what these sanctions could become. I think it'd make a great show.
See, I think what the Treasury Department needs to do now is clarify. Because if you leave this up to interpretation, this becomes very, very dangerous, right? And now every scenario could be different. So they've got to come up, I think, with some really good guidelines so people understand when they're in trouble, when they're not in trouble, and let them make decisions. But if you leave it open-ended, I think that interpretation becomes dangerous.
Because if it is, are they ransomwaring and encrypting all my files? And or have they stolen my data first before they encrypted it? And like, what's my payment going to? Maybe they didn't even encrypt my file. Maybe they just got a copy of it. And really, that's just extortion, not necessarily ransomware, right? So like, is there a difference between that? I don't know.
That's why I left it for the last article. Gentlemen, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to welcome Param to discuss peer-to-peer collaboration.